Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I hope all of you are very well. So, today's our last lecture about 5403, unit number 9. And the title of this unit is Introduction to Computer Languages. In this chapter, we will learn what is computer language and what are the important computer languages and what is the basic working of computer languages. The content of this unit includes the basic understanding about programming languages. Then we will come to know like what are the different types of languages, broadly categorized as lower level languages and high level languages. Then we will also understand the very important question from exam point of view, which is the compiler and the interpreter, overall which we call them the language translators. So it is very important to understand the basic difference between compiler and interpreter. Then we will also learn some basic or commonly used high level languages, and then we will also understand the concept of object oriented programming languages. And then in the last we will also learn what is HTML, and we will also do some practical of some basic HTML because of now all the applications are based on web based, and all your web sites are in fact based on HTML and JavaScripts. So as an introduction, basically programming language is one of the important domains in IT. The choice of programming language is critical for the success of IT applications, and this unit describes the different types of programming languages and the generations of computer programming languages. The concept of compiler, interpreter, and linker is also explained. To understand in very basic, like simple English, what is the importance of language? In our real life as well, in real human, like when we live anywhere, so language plays very important role. Why? Because we live in a social, like we live in a society, we cannot live in isolation. So when we live in a society, when we live as a community, we need to communicate. We need to communicate with each other using some language. So unless and until we speak some language, and the other person to whom we are like talking or sending our message, that person also needs to know some language, and the language has to be same. That's how you can like communicate. So in our real life as well, the language plays very important role, because we transfer our thoughts, we explain what we want to say, we give instructions, we give our feedback using language. Even when we go to some abroad country, for example if you go to China, and if they are not able to understand English or the language which you speak, so it becomes very difficult. So you need to have some translator, you need to have some interpreter, you need to have some software which will help you to communicate. So if you don't use, like if you're not using any translator, and the other person is not able to understand your language, so it is very difficult to live a life, because it is not possible like to remain quiet, because your daily life needs communication. So the same principle can be applied in computer. Like in our initial lectures, we understood, like we talked about like what is the basic purpose of computer. A computer is a machine which is solving our problems. So how can you make it to solve your problem unless you give the computer some instructions? So to give computer instructions, you need to know some language which your computer can understand. So this is the part where like which highlights the importance of computer languages. So in this unit, the objectives of this unit is to understand the basic concept of computer languages. So now we were talking about the human languages. Now in this unit we will understand what is the basic concept of computer languages, and to become familiar with high level languages and low level languages. And also the objective of this unit is to, so that we can differentiate between compiler, interpreter, and linker, and have knowledge about different generations of programming languages and their characteristics. So basically, just like a human language, a computer language also has some that basic principles. Like a computer cannot perform any operation at its own, so it requires some instructions. Definitely, it's a dumb machine. It's a electronic machine, so it cannot think by itself. It needs some instruction to perform some task. So how can we give instructions? Definitely, we have to give some instructions. And what is the basic language of a computer? Can you answer? What do you think? What is the basic language of a computer? Yes, please. As we know, like computer is an electronic machine, so it works on electric current, right? So electric current, as we said, has only two states. It has 1 and 0. It has only state of current exist or it's not existing. So it only understands 1 and 0. It only understands the binary language. But we human being, we cannot understand and remember binary language. It is very difficult for us. So the basic language which computer can understand is the binary language. So it requires instruction in the binary language so that it can perform some task. So that's where the importance of computer languages like arises. There should be some common, there should be some high level programming languages which is like near to English language, so that we can also remember, so that we can give instructions, and then later on that those instructions may be converted into the language which is understandable by the computer. So this is now the question is how to formulate the instructions. So how, in which form we can give instructions? We cannot like tell computer in Urdu. We cannot tell computer in by waving it or by telling it, okay, just do it for me. So you need to give some standard instructions so that it may perform the things based on some syntax and semantics. Syntax means the patterns, the standard. For example, just like the syntax of writing English is, you write the characters, you give the spaces. This is the syntax, like you give full stop. And what is the semantic? Semantic means the meaning of, because just combination of characters is not enough, because if I just mix random characters, it will not make any sense. So both syntax and semantics is very important in any language. Same goes for the computer language. As we said, the computer only understands binary language. So it doesn't mean you just give any binary to computer. Definitely you need to give some binary which makes some sense, which makes some sense of instructions. So a computer language is an artificial language which is used for writing instructions or programs. A computer language is also known as programming language. And a programming language provides a way of giving instructions to the computer. It is used to communicate, give commands to a computer. So the basic function of programming, of any programming language, is to communicate with the computer so that users can communicate with the computer. Because to make it work, we need to give instructions, we need to give it input so that it can perform the output. So how we give instructions to the computer? It is in the form of computer programs. Just like we said in our computer software. What is a software? Software is a set of instructions. And set of instructions, you saw the picture of the globe. It starts with the instructions. A set of instruction becomes a program, and a set of programs becomes a software. So a software or instructions basically are the set of instructions which we call it a program. So a program is a set of commands or instructions which we give to the computer to perform some specific task. A program instructs the computer to perform a task and produce the required result. So this is the basic principle of any computer program. Program is a set of instructions. Like if you want computer to add two numbers, you will say, okay, take two numbers, add them, and after adding, give the result on the screen. So these are 3 or 4 liner instructions which makes a very simple program so that computer can work. So broadly speaking, when we categorize the programming languages, so there are two types of programming languages. One are the low level languages and the second one is the high level languages. To broadly understand both of these, the low level language means those languages which are closer to machine language. Just like in our initial like we talked, like computer is is an electronic device, so it is working on a binary principle, so it is working based on current. So the language which is very near to the binary language, the language of computer, those languages are called low level languages. On the other side, we human beings have some other languages, and what is the common language in our human beings is normally English. It's an like international language. So now the computer languages which are closer to human language, which are closer to English language, normally they are categorized as high level languages. So in first category, in low level languages, there are broadly two categories of languages. One is the machine language, the other one is the assembly language. So the machine language is the fundamental language which we talked about, that it's a binary language. So machine is working on binary. So in machine language, it is a fundamental language, and originally programs were written in the machine language, and the machine language was the only language a computer can use while giving instructions, because it is the native language. Just like when we go to China or some other country like Turkey, so when you are giving instruction in the native language, when you're giving some Chinese, when you're giving some instructions to the Turkish people in Turkish language, or in Chinese to Chinese people in Chinese language, so it will be very easy for them to understand what you are saying. So same goes for the computer. When you are giving instructions to the computer in machine language, so it will be very fast, it will be very easy for the computer to understand and to perform the tasks. So but this is the pattern of a binary machine language or a machine language, like off on off on off on. Off is represented by 0 and 1 is represented by, like on is represented by 1. So this is the language which we call it machine language, and it is directly understood by the computer. Its processing speed is very high. Why? Because there is no additional layer. So typical operations can involve like reading, writing, adding, subtracting, and so on. So these are the advantages of machine language, that it has fast execution. Why? Because it is native language, because there is no third person telling the computer, so we are directly telling computer, so it will be very fast in execution, and it will require no translator or decoder. Definitely when we like if two Pakistanis are talking, if they are talking in Urdu, so it will be very easy for them to communicate, because there is no third person involved. And if you go to some abroad country where your language is not understandable, so it involves additional translator. So it, if you have ever experienced it, it creates delay. There is a lot of information which is lost in between translating the words. But what is the disadvantage of this language? Definitely it is easy for computer, but at the same time it is very difficult for humans to understand, humans to remember, humans to code. So these languages are machine specific, and also these are not common for all over the computers as well. Like for it depends on the architecture of the computer, because a, a machine language or a binary language which is which is meant for one computer cannot work on another computer, because based on the structure of the machine, the binary language also is changed in terms of its meaning. So this is one of the drawback. The second drawback is a programmer has to know the details of the computer hardware before writing the program, because based on the structure, a programmer needs to code it accordingly. And definitely it is very difficult to find errors, because for users, for programmers, it is very difficult to memorize, it is very difficult to remember. So it becomes very difficult task, and programs becomes very lengthy, because the instructions, each of your instructions is in hundreds or thousands of like lines in binary language, so it creates a lot of long programs. Second level of your low level language is the assembly language. This is one step easier, as if you see it from human perspective, from user's perspective, it is little bit like away from the machine and slightly coming towards the human. So assembly, why it is towards human? Because it is represented by symbols. There is no machine language in it. So assembly language was developed by the programmers to overcome the drawbacks of the machine language. So just like in our old ages, you remember, people used to communicate using symbols. Even now, whenever we want to communicate, maybe on the roads, so we communicate through symbols like letters. Just like we write P for the parking, we design some symbols which is understood by all the travelers, all the drivers. Instead of writing the details like you don't have to park here, we just write P and cross, so it is symbolic language. So just like those, assembly language uses letter, words, symbols instead of binary digits, and it is easier, a bit easier than machine language, and it uses mnemonic codes, which means the symbols, abbreviations for the words. Just like I said, P is in our real life. Same goes for in assembly language. We can write add, move. These are some short words, mnemonic codes, which are used to add numbers, to move the data from one location to another location. So these are a program written in assembly language is called source program, and this program is converted into the machine code by an assembler. So definitely a computer cannot understand assembly language. So we really need to convert the assembly language into a binary language. So there comes the need of a translator, and a translator which translates the assembly language. The assembly language program is called a source program, and later then it is converted into the machine language, and the program which is converting this assembly language into the machine language is called assembler, right? So these are some basic mnemonic codes like showing addition, division, and storing data. So these are some advantages of assembly language. Like the programs written in machine language are replaced by mnemonics, which are easier to remember. You can easily make insertions, deletions, and fewer instructions as compared to. So the length of the program is also decreased in assembly language. But what are the disadvantages? So the language assemblers are exclusive to the particular type of computer. So one assembler cannot work everywhere. So each computer has some different should have different assemblers based on the structure or the hierarchy or the internal circuits of the computer. So it is not portable. Just like in today's world, when we develop some programs or games, we we are not worried about it. Like we can run those programs anywhere nowadays. Like when we use games, when we use softwares, so normally we are not worried about it. We can run it like on many computers. We can run it on multiple operating systems, on multiple devices. But at that time, or the programs which are developed using assembly language, they have such kind of problems. Now the second category, the above two were the machine language and the assembly language. They were the parts of the low level languages. Now we are talking about high level languages. So as we said, like low level languages, both of them are those languages which are near to computers. They're not very near to humans or the users. So the humans or the programmers felt the need, like for the programmers in initial days of the programmers, like in early 50s, 60s, 70s, it was really difficult to become a programmer because it was a very specialized task. But nowadays you can see programming is not a specific, is it is not a specific now task or a skill. Now if you see, even the engineers, they are like taught programming, the teachers are being taught programming. So whether whatever field you have now, even in higher studies, you are supposed to learn programming, because programming is no more the task of a programmer. Now it is a universe. It is going to become, it is becoming a common skill, which is like mandatory for all the field professionals. Whether you are a teacher, you should know some basic understanding of languages. If you are like geologist, if you are a scientist, if you are a biologist, so all of the processes are now being converted into a computer based processes. So that's why you need some know-how about the programming languages. But the initial programming languages, which were like low level languages, definitely they are very difficult. to understand. So for other people it is very difficult to understand such things, so their programmers felt the need and they developed the high level languages. So the basically the purpose of high level HLL languages was to make some easy interface of the languages which is very near to human language, and especially English language, so that the programmers can easily give instructions in English language, and later on it can be converted into the machine language for computer to understand. So definitely we cannot make computer eligible to understand English. We need to create some other software translators which can convert the high level languages into the machine languages. So what was the basic advantages and what are the advantages of the high level languages? That it is machine independent. So this is the major change. Like and the program written in high level language is not dependent on machine because it is not having any machine code. So that's why a high level program written in a high level language can be executed on different platforms, can be executed on different machines. So whenever it is running on any other machine, so it is always converted into the like in the machine language which is understandable by that machine. And it is easy to learn and use. Why? Because it is based on English. It requires less time and effort to write a program, definitely, because you don't need to remember, because you are just like giving instructions in a computer in an English language, not exactly English language, but you need to follow some rules, but still it's in English language. And it provides better documentation of programs due to similarity with the natural languages, and the debugging is very easy as compared to the low level languages. It is very easy to trace what are the errors and how can you reduce. And similarly, as I said, the high level languages cannot be directly understood by the computer, so we need to translate it. So the programs, the softwares which are translating, or in general we call them language translators, the softwares which are translating high level language into a computer language. And in the language translator there are two types. We call it compiler and interpreter. These both are the language translator, but there is slight difference between compiler and interpreter. And I said you this is the very important topic as well from exam point of view as well, to differentiate between compiler and interpreter. So compiler and interpreter are basically the softwares, are basically the translators which translate the high level languages into a low level language or a machine language. So here comes the basic difference between, so what is the compiler and what is the interpreter? A compiler and interpreter both are the language translators. The only difference between both of them is the way of working. Let us understand with the help of an example. Let us assume, just like I said, when we go to China and we want to communicate with someone, some Chinese, and they don't understand our language, so definitely we need to have some translator with us, just like a computer translator, a language translator. So compiler is a guy. For example, we have hired our compiler with us. So who will be the compiler for us? Who is translating the English language or our Urdu language into Chinese? And how is translating our language? Like we talked the whole paragraph. Like we talked the whole like one paragraph in Urdu, and that compiler translated the whole paragraph, the whole program into the Chinese and telling that's Chinese. So compiler is a just like an expert translator. So he's an expert translator and he's translating the program as a whole. As a whole, he's very expert. So he's converting the whole talk into that target language. So the compiler is also same like, so program the compiler is also a translator, but it translates the whole program in one go, okay. So it converts the program into the machine code which is understandable by the computer. So it is just like an expert translator. And the interpreter is also doing the same thing, but he's like slightly a beginner level of translator. So what will be the difference between the beginner level and high level? That beginner level will say, okay, you don't speak like the whole paragraph, you just give instructions one by one. For example, I will say, okay, hello, how are you, and the interpreter will translate my one sentence into the Chinese language. So the interpreter in computer program is also a software which translates one line by line. So it translates one line at a time, and then it runs the code on the machine. So it is slightly less experienced, so it works on line by line principle. This is the basic difference between the compiler and interpreter. So in case you are seeing, source code is a program which you write in any language, in any high level language or a low level language. In this scenario, you're writing a program in a high level language, for example in C++, in Java, in PHP, or whatever programming. So what compiler is doing, he is an expert translator. He is taking your input as a whole, and he's converting that whole program into the required, whatever is required, is converting the whole program and giving it to the further processing. But what is the interpreter? He is slightly a beginner level of translator, and he is converting your source code into the machine code, but it is converting it in line by line. It is doing in bits and pieces. So definitely it is fast, it is slow. So this is the basic difference between compiler and a interpreter. So due to scanning a program in one go, and a compiler takes a larger amount of time in translating and executing high level language code, and interpreter on the other hand scans line by line, therefore takes lesser time in same process. So the linker is an additional thing. What is linker doing? A linker is an editor of a computer program that links one or more object files to generate a compiled file, combines into a single unit of execute program. For example, when you write a program in this scenario, so after compiling or interpreting, it is executing the program. So finally it is making, because source code can have different sources, it is taking data from hundreds of files. So while it is data is compiled or interpreted, finally it is making a single file which is having all the object files, so that is executable. Just like when you compile the program, it makes a one file which is executable, just like when you install the game. So you have only single file, executable file, when you double click it and the game is executed or the program is executed. So that is the purpose of a linker, which is it's combining all the object files, all the source files into a single file, single executable files. So now we will come to the commonly used high level languages, because we talked about the low level languages, we talked about the high level languages and how they are working. Some are like, some have assemblers, some have interpreters, and some have compilers to compile the programs into the machine language. So now in high level languages, there are some procedure oriented languages, which the procedure oriented languages are those languages in which you follow some procedure. The the procedure oriented languages are like, you give the instruction in line by line, you don't have any structure, you have not organized your instructions, you are just giving instructions like in one go. So these the programming languages, or this is now this is the orientation, basically this is the what you can say, it's action plan action, how these languages are working. So the programming languages which follow the procedural way of in giving instructions to the computer are called like procedural oriented languages, and the other part is the high, which we'll talk about the OOPS, object oriented languages. So the procedural object oriented languages are those languages which work on some basic procedures. So the disadvantage of machine and assembly language led to the development of the procedural languages, and it was in late 50s and 60s. They are also called third generation of computer languages. They are like English language, but they follow some procedure. So they are based upon the procedure call. A procedure consists of series of steps. So it includes steps to be executed by a computer system. It can have routines, subroutines. These are the functions, methods or functions. Programmers convert the source program into the machine language using the compiler or interpreter according to the it is changed according to the language of the whatever language we are using. So what are the examples of these procedure oriented languages? One example is Fortran. These abbreviations are very important from exam point of view, that you should know that Fortran was developed in 1957, and it stands for Formula Translation, and it was developed for programming of scientific mathematical applications. It's not very much used right in current days. And some of the significant features of these languages are that these language is easy to learn, the programs are portable, and machine and they are machine independent. The complex mathematical equations can be written in simple regular algebraic notations. It provides efficient execution of programs. It allows to control the allocation of storage, and it provides more autonomy in code layout as compared to the low level languages. So this is the syntax of Fortran. You really don't need to remember the program, but it is just to give you an overview how these programs are working. So this is a sample program from the Fortran, like it is showing what this program is basically doing. It is printing a number square cube, like from 1 to 10 it is printing 1 to 10 number series, and for each number it is printing the it's each number square and each number's cube. So it is a loop. You don't need to go in the detail to how programming is. You don't need to remember, because it is not your programming subject, but this unit is just giving you an overview how the programming is working. Like these are the set of instructions. Now these 1 2 3 4 5 6 sixth line instructions is what is it is doing. It is generating a series of numbers like 1 to 10, and it is printing its square and it's printing its cube. The other popular language is COBOL, which stands for Common Business Oriented Language, and it is like one of the older high level languages, and it was developed in 1959, and it was developed by a group of computer experts consortium called Conference on Data System Languages. And what are the like features of the COBOL? Because it name shows it was meant for the business applications. It is a common business oriented language, so it was focusing on business. It is simple language. It encourages a simple programming style. It is like it was meant for file records, and variables are defined in detail. The language is portable at its standard, does not belong to any particular vendor, so it was portable. So this is a sample program of COBOL, which is like doing something, printing a hello world, how are you. And the now a very popular language, which is part of a high level language, which is the C language, which is still being used. And if you might have heard its name as well. And now we use it like C++, C sharp. There are many multiple flavors of additional flavor of this language, but this is very popular language, and it was developed in 1970s by Dennis Ritchie. This is very important to remember that this Dennis Ritchie was working in at AT and Bell Labs, and there he developed the C language. We also call the foundation of C was earlier Bell Labs, and before, why we call it C language, because before earlier C it was a B language. So later on they evolved it more, and then later version they called it C language, and this C language became very much popular. Even now it is very in your like the computer in the CS programs. Now the starting language is C or C++. They even teach you at intermediate level as well. So what are the features of C language? That it is a general purpose programming language, so that's why it's very popular. It is not orient only for the business. It is very general purpose, so it can be applied anywhere in business, in education, by students, and many other high end as well, hardware side. It is very efficient. It is very powerful language. It is independent. It does not depend on the machine architecture. That's why it can work on any computer. So, and the modularity, like we can break the program into smaller measurable pieces, manageable pieces, which makes it very easy to understand. So this is a sample program. This is a C program which is adding, I think, yeah, adding the two numbers. So is a few liner code, but uh, you can understand, like it is printing this thing, it is getting the input of two numbers and it is adding the two numbers, and after it is asking you, okay, give two numbers, and when whatever the two numbers you are giving, it is just acting like a calculator. You just give the two numbers and it is adding the two number and giving you the result. Okay, the sum of the number is this. Now if the second part is the object oriented programming language, just like we said, a procedural programming languages. Now the second part of the high level languages are those languages which follow this orientation. This is the way of doing programming. So this programming language is doing is working based on the object oriented. It is working on the object principle. Like in our real life, we when we look around in our daily life, we see many things, we might see many objects. Even within your room, you can see the fan, you can see chairs, you can see doors. So all of them are objects. Like you can have multiple objects of doors, you can have multiple objects of fans, and each object has its properties, and some properties are common and some properties are different. So this real life scenario has been adopted in programming so that we can reuse the things. Just like in our real life, when we see there are many things which are repeated, like when you go in a park and you see a lot of birds, so you can categorize, okay, these are birds, and birds have the feature of flying, the birds have a beak, birds have two legs. So these are some common features, and some are the unique features, like this bird can fly this much high and this bird can fly like this much high. So using this real life scenario, the programming languages uses this concept which we call object oriented. So these object orientation approach gives us the benefit of encapsulation. Encapsulation means hiding something. Like for example, you buy a medicine from a market, from a pharmacy, and what is encapsulated, like in a capsule there is a medicine inside it, and you don't know what's inside it, you don't know the formula, you don't know how they have made it. You are just as a normal human, you are just concerned about what is the function. Like you will see, okay, this is for headache, okay, this is for pain, you just use it. You're not concerned about of its nitty and gritty. So this concept is also used in programming, like a program which is encapsulating the function, which is encapsulating the operation, but only you are concerned about its functionality. Like you can say, okay, this is a function which is giving the table of any number, and you are not concerned how it is creating a table. You just give it an input, okay, give me the table of 2, so it will generate the table of 2. Similarly, the polymorphism, this is the concept of behaving a same function behaving differently. For example, when you give the two numbers which are like positive numbers, the function is adding, and if you give the two numbers which are like negative in nature and they are doing something else, so same function doing behaving differently. Just like human beings, like we human beings don't behave similarly, because it depends what are the other conditions. Based on some other factors, we behave differently. So in computer programming languages, functions have can behave differently based on the input. And also the inheritance concept, like just like humans, we inherit, our kids inherit so many things from parents, in real inheritance as well, in behavior, like as well, like in terms of money as well, a house maybe is inherited, but also in terms of behavior as well. So same principle is adopted in programming languages. Like you create some function, and you create some function which is a child function of some parent function. So the basic functionality is automatically inherited by the child function. So these are some popular languages which follow this principle. One of them is Java, and it is different from JavaScript. Java and JavaScript are two different things. So you need to remember this. Okay. So Java is a language and JavaScript is a scripting language, and both of them are different. So this is Java. This is also very popular, still being used by many applications. because of these features, because it has compiler and interpreter, it is platform independent, and the code of Java is robust. It has built-in capabilities to ensure the violations of securities do not occur. And Java is a distributed language because it supports the network programming, and it is capable to employ multi-threading techniques for program execution. So it has some extensive features. That's why it is still, this is the sample program of Java, slightly difficult for you and slightly even difficult for programmers to, and this is very high end programming language where even they are highly paid. The Java programmers are paid very good salaries even now in nowadays as well. C++ is an extension of C language. I told you the C is very popular language and still being used. So C++ is it is also in current days they are being used by hardware side programming and very specialized programming. C++ is an elegant language and it is wide range of compilers. It is has a large function library. So these are some features why it is popular. This is the sample program C++. Now, coming to the fourth generation languages. So what are the fourth generation languages? So normally fourth generation languages are covered, the languages which were offered in during 70s to 1990s. These are the non-classical, non-procedural high-level programming languages, and one of them is the SQL. This is very popular language, and they are considered under 4GLs. This is the database query language because you know there are a number of databases. What is database? A database is a system which is storing a lot of data in an organized way so that we can recall it. For example, in an Amaik University, your students' data is stored in a database, in a large database. So how to recall, how to extract the information from the database, we need to know some language. So the language which is used to communicate with database is called SQL. It is structured query language through which we communicate with the databases to generate the reports and many other for many other things. This category is called visual programming languages. The programming languages which have some visual, you really don't need to type the instructions. We also categorize these languages as the fifth generation languages, and you have also done some programming in it in our previous lectures. We did the programming in Google Scratch. Yes, the Google Scratch is a fifth generation language which is using a visual programming technique. We just do the programming using the visual things. Now we will wind up our lecture and do some practical as well. This section of your unit is talking about the web page development. As I told you, now the things are being moved on web, everything on web, like your online classes are on the web, your softwares, a lot of softwares which were which were used in your local PCs. Now they have become web based softwares so that you can access it from anywhere. So when you go to the website, any website, all the websites are based on HTML. So HTML is a language. It's not a programming language, but it's a markup language. So whenever you open a website in any web browser, so your browser can only understand HTML and JavaScript or CSS. So all the websites are finally they are converted into HTML, and so that you can program, so that you can make the pages, you can design the information. We will just go, yeah, this is the sample HTML page. And if even if I go to I will recommend you to go to W3 schools. If you type W3 schools, this is very good for like beginners to understand a lot of languages. So if you go to W3 schools and you write, okay, I want to learn HTML, it will give you step-by-step procedure how to learn. For example, this is a sample code. You can write this code in your notepad and just save that file by saving with .html. If I click on try itself, you can write the code online so that I can see what is happening. For example, this is a sample code showing the page title. It has the head section, it has a body section. You don't need to remember, just for understanding, basic understanding. This is the heading tag. it is showing this is a heading 1. Okay, I will say heading 1. I can also, for example, I let me copy it and I will do it paste, and I will say okay heading 2, and I say it okay it's heading 2. It's a level of heading. For example, just let me run it. So now look at the difference of heading 1 and heading 2. Heading 1 is large, just like in MS Word you have heading 1 and heading 2. This is paragraph. So you can, for example, let me create, I will say okay a heading 3. I will say okay AIOU website, and I say it close it with heading 3. What I want to do, I want to create a link. For example, I want to say okay when someone will click on this link, it should go to Ilama Iqbal Ministry website. It's an anchor tag. We say okay flash A. Let me see what happens. Okay, when I run it, now you see there's a link, hyperlink. When you click on this, it is going to open the website of the university. So there are a lot of things. For example, even if I want to add a picture here, I will say okay img src, and I will copy the image link and I paste it here, and I just run it again. So now within my page, look, I have inserted an image using this HTML code. So this is the basic HTML code. You don't need to remember it. Just for your understanding, it is covered like for basic understanding. Whenever you're going to open any web page, so all the websites, for example, let me open Lama Means website, and you right click on it. You can click on view page source, and it will show its HTML. So this is the HTML which is auto generated by different softwares. Nowadays you don't need to type HTML for everything. It is automatically generated. So along with HTML, there are scripting languages just like JavaScript, VBScript, PHP, Perl, to extend the website. For example, your website is having the database of students. It is getting the data uh, from different servers, so from CMS. So these are helpful in these. So what are the basic good characteristics of a programming languages? Like a programming language should be simple, it should be user friendly. These are the standard features that every programming language should be. Its syntax should be resemblance with the natural language. The more it is closer to the English language, it is more user friendly, definitely. It should be capable of handling different programming approaches, just like we studied the procedural approach and the object oriented approach. Similarly, the language should have the compactness and extensibility feature, and it should be good enough to highlight the errors so that we can remove them. So in this paragraph, it is showing how to select a programming language. So definitely, it depends on many factors. It depends on in which domain you're working. What is the requirement of your like business? What is the requirement of your client? And what is your knowledge even? Like someone gives you task, okay, develop a website for me. So there could be many factors. Maybe client says, okay, make a website in PHP, and then you can maybe learn PHP if you don't know. But if your client say, okay, I only need website, I don't know what language you want to use, it's up to you. So definitely you will use the language which you know. Or maybe if for specific software, if there is only option for specific language, then you will learn that language and develop the things in that thing. So this is our last lecture, and this was all about programming language. You don't need to become a programmer, but this is very like futuristic thing. If you are not programmer, I will highly recommend you especially go towards the Google Scratch, towards the visual programming things, and it will really help you in your career. It will really help you in your future jobs, in whatever field you will join or you are already in. The programming concepts will really help you. You can automate your things. You can even if you're not programming, you are if your basic understanding of programming will give you a good logical thinking as well. So as a self-assessment questions, you need to question yourself, like what is programming language, we covered this, what is difference between low level and high level and low level language, and why high level is easier. Definitely it is close to English language, and which makes it easy to remember. And what are the features of high level languages, compiler and interpreter, this I'm again telling, very important. And what are the important characteristics of programming languages, what are the important parameters that influence the selection of a programming language, we already talked about this question as well. So these are some activities. So in addition to these activities, I will again recommend you to make some tasks in your, especially Google Scratch. You have to work in Google Scratch so that you can understand what is visual programming, so you can use it. So you might have already done it, but do explore it again. I will again open it again for you, Google Scratch. This is a project of MIT. So if you explore it more, there are special training tutorials as well. There are sample programs as well. You can explore these. Different students, different programmers have developed programs based on Scratch. So you can make those programs according to your requirements, even for parents, for educators. So it is used in education. So I will highly recommend you to, after this programming lecture, you should explore this Google Scratch, so that it gives you a good understanding. So this was our unit number 9, and I hope it gave you some basic understanding about programming languages, and so you can apply in your daily life, apply in your domain, whatever you are like, you will join or you are already in. So thank you very much for watching this lecture. And now, if you are most welcome, if you have any question related to unit number 9, or if you have any question related to ICT, you are most welcome. Thank you very much.